Starting a business can seem like a daunting task, unless you have a partner like Shopify. They have the tools you need to start and grow your business. From designing a website to marketing to selling and beyond, Shopify can help with everything you need. There's a reason millions of companies like Mattel, Heinz, and Allbirds continue to trust and use them. With Shopify on your side, turn your big business idea into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
Halliday presents, in the red corner, the undisputed, undefeated Weed Whacker Guy. Champion of hurling grass and pollen everywhere. And in the blue corner, the challenger, extra strength Halliday. Eye drops that work all day to prevent the release of histamines that cause itchy allergy eyes. And the winner, by knockout, is Halliday. Halliday, bring it on.
Welcome back, True Crime Army. I am your host, Margot, and this is Military Murder, a show where I focus on crimes committed by military members and veterans. But don't worry, you don't have to know anything about the military to listen. You just have to be a true crime enthusiast, and if that's you, welcome home. This week, I have decided to lay off of the devastating murder cases that I typically bring you, and I wanted to bring you something involving less death and more con men. Last week, I dropped a bonus episode about a dude who applied to be a hitman online, and that case was a doozy. If you aren't already a Patreon or an Apple Premium subscriber, consider joining the club to listen to the 45 bonus episodes available right now. And while you listen, you support this indie show. All right, so for my bonus episode, there was no death. For this case today, there is no death either. With that, join me today as I tell you a few stories of men who disappeared, were declared dead, only to rise from the dead. Now, let's dig in.
Military murder is an independent project and is not endorsed by the Department of Defense or any military component. The views expressed are those of the host. The content of this podcast is not meant to be legal or medical advice. Warning, this episode contains graphic details of murder and is not suitable for young listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
On May 12, 1987, at around 5:30 a.m., 27-year-old Air Force Staff Sergeant James Douglas Pou, who went by Doug, got up to go on his daily 27-mile bike ride. His route took him over the Rio Grande via the Rio Bravo Bridge in Albuquerque, New Mexico. At 6 foot 3 inches tall and 195 pounds, Doug looked like the model of military fitness. When he wasn't going on his weekday 27-mile bike ride, he was doing an alternate workout that consisted of riding his bike 11 miles, completing an 8-mile run up a mountain, and then running 8 miles back down. Then he would finish up by riding the 11 miles back home. In a different article that I read, one of his workouts was described as a 39-mile bike ride to the La Luz Trail north of Albuquerque, where he would run the trail to an elevation of 10,632 feet, and then he would run back down. Doug was a pararescue specialist, more commonly known as a PJ, and he was assigned as an instructor at the pararescue school at Kirkland Air Force Base in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Due to his job as a PJ, Doug had to stay in top physical shape. PJs are elite combat forces and are, according to the Air Force website, quote, specifically organized, trained, equipped, and postured to conduct full-spectrum personnel recovery to include both conventional and unconventional combat rescue ops, end quote. The PJ's motto is, quote, we do these things so others may live, end quote. To break that down a little bit, I got this from the Air Force website, quote, when an injured airman needs saving from a hostile or otherwise unreachable area, it's our duty to bring them home. As members of the Air Force Special Warfare, pararescue men rescue and medically treat downed military personnel all over the world. These highly trained experts take part in every aspect of the mission and are skilled parachutists, scuba divers, and rock climbers, and they are even Arctic trained in order to access any environment to save a life when they're called to do so, end quote. When Doug told his wife Susie and their 2 boys goodbye before his ride on Thursday, May 12th, Susie expected him to ride, then go straight to work where he was due to report at 6:30 in the morning. She called the base at 10:15 to talk to her husband, but Doug's buddy and fellow PJ instructor, Sergeant Bill Burton, told her that no one had seen Doug that morning. Susie was worried when she heard this, but by midday, when Doug still didn't show up at work or come home, Susie was in a near panic mode. She called back to the base and spoke to Bill again. Susie let him know that she was extremely upset that Doug was missing. Bill and the other members of Doug's squadron were also worried. It was out of character for the decorated NCO to just not show up for work. They decided to go search for Doug themselves. The group of PJs initiated a search pattern based on the route that Doug normally took on his daily bike ride. And it was during this search that Bill and some other searchers came across pieces of Doug's bike on the Rio Bravo Bridge. Yes, I said pieces of the bike, like the bike had been wrecked, leaving parts behind. Also found were one bike shoe and his water bottle. But there was no sign of Doug, so they kept searching for 3 more days. On Sunday, the rest of Doug's bicycle was found by a sanitation worker near a dumpster 10 miles away from the Rio Bravo Bridge. The best that they could presume occurred by the evidence found was that Doug was hit while riding his bike on the bridge, and someone passing by picked up his bike and then abandoned it by the dumpster after they realized the extent of the damage, or that it may have been connected to an accident. The bike was a high-end racing bicycle worth a lot of money. As the mystery deepened, the elite PJs continued to search for their brother in arms. For the following 10 days, a team of 26 airmen walked the banks of the Rio Grande River. They were looking for any signs of their missing comrade. Bill and a few of the others swam an 8-mile stretch from the bridge where they found the shoe, the water bottle, and the bike parts downstream to the floodgates where they hoped they might find Doug's body. Also during this 10-day search, the Pou family put up a $5,000 reward, and it was for any information leading to Doug's recovery. Bill handed out over 1,500 reward posters himself. The local news picked up on the story about the missing Air Force NCO, and it was broadcast nationwide. Without any tips or clues, the search was officially called off by the Air Force on May 22, 1987. It had just been 10 days after Doug disappeared. Susie and Doug's mom, Marianne, met with base officials. The Air Force declared Staff Sergeant James Douglas Pou dead as of the day he disappeared, which was May 12th. Despite the Air Force's proclamation, Doug's unit was not done searching for him. They spent a total of 1,200 hours over the next several months searching the river for any sign of Doug. They rented bloodhounds and walked the banks of the Rio Grande over and over and over again. On 2 different occasions, the dogs alerted to Doug's scent. The bridge had a 3.5-foot wall to protect pedestrians from falling into the water. At the spot where the bike parts and the shoe were found, one of the dogs alerted to Doug's scent. The PJs rented canoes and focused their search along that part of the river. Another dog alerted at the bottom of the bridge, so the PJs started diving in that location and really ramped up their search efforts. It was dangerous work. The current in the river was moving so fast that it caused white water rapids to form, making their diving efforts extremely hazardous. Following heavy rains in the days before Doug's disappearance, the water was moving close to 25 miles per hour. Plus, the river was at a 40-year high that May. Despite the final push to locate Doug or his remains, nothing was found from the PJ's efforts. The official line from the Air Force was that Doug was missing and presumed dead. A year after his disappearance, a memorial was held for Doug, where he was eulogized by friends as an all-American hero who saved so many lives in his job as a PJ. The Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office and a private investigator, or PI, hired by the Pows, concluded that Doug was struck by a car or truck and knocked into the river from the bridge where he drowned. The PI, whose name was Keith Patterson, told the Akron Beacon Journal, quote, "I believe there was an accident on the Rio Bravo Bridge. I am quite confident that a vehicle struck Doug's bicycle." The physical evidence found on the bridge, pieces from the plastic guard on the bike's back wheel, and pedal marks on the retaining wall support the basic hypothesis, end quote. After consulting accident reconstruction experts, Keith Peterson surmised that, quote, "Based on the evidence, my best guess is that the bicycle was struck at a sharp angle on the left side, causing the derailleur to come off and the back wheel to lock up. The bike continued to move 30 to 50 feet before coming to an abrupt stop, probably by hitting the retaining wall. Doug was then thrown from the bike into the river, end quote. Bill Burton, Doug's PJ buddy, did not agree with the PI. He told the Akron Beacon Journal, quote, "It's 1 in 1,000 that he's in the river. If I hadn't personally searched every square inch of that river from the bridge to the floodgates each day for months, I wouldn't be able to say that with the same conviction. I don't know what happened to him. I believe unofficially that he was killed, probably in some form of a vehicular accident. It's also a bad part of town with a high crime rate, drug use, and people living under bridges. Something happened on that bridge, but I don't know what," end quote. Doug's family had a hard time accepting that he was dead. The unknown was nearly unbearable for Susie, who told the paper, quote, "Deep down, I accept the investigators' findings. I mean, if you look at all the evidence, what else can you believe?" End quote. Doug's mother, Marianne, agreed with her daughter-in-law, stating, quote, "Logic tells me he's gone since we don't yet have the physical evidence. There is still that yearning to want to know for sure. Now I must do the best that I can and be grateful we had Doug for as long as we did," end quote. After Doug was declared dead, Susie moved back to Spokane, Washington, where she grew up. In 1990, 3 years after Doug's disappearance, she was starting to move on. She was planning on taking college classes to become a physical therapist. As the pain faded, Susie mused, quote, "The memories are warm and not nearly so painful. We'll never get over losing Doug, but through faith, we have to go on living. Doug would have wanted us to be happy. We believed in living life and in helping others. He was a hero to so many. We love and miss him," end quote. Today's episode is sponsored by Acorns, and April is Financial Literacy Month, an entire month dedicated to taking control of your money. Because honestly, no one really taught me how to manage money growing up. I didn't learn about investing until I was well into adulthood. But what I love about Acorns is that it makes it easy to start saving and investing for your future in just 5 minutes. I know, April is an entire month, but you don't need an entire month to learn. You don't need to be an expert. Acorns recommends a diversified portfolio that matches you and your goals. You can start with just your spare change. And you don't need a lot of time. Setup takes just 5 minutes because I know that your time is precious. And if financial wellness has ever felt out of reach, Acorns makes it simple, giving your money a chance to grow without the overwhelm. Personally, using Acorns gave me the confidence to stop putting it off and just start. And that peace of mind is completely worth it. Sign up now and join over 14 million all-time customers who've already saved and invested over $25 billion with a B dollars with Acorns. Head to acorns.com/militarymama or download the Acorns app to get started today. Paid non-client endorsement. Compensation provides incentive to positively promote Acorns. Tier 1 compensation provided. Investing involves risk. Acorns Advisors, LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor. View important disclosures at acorns.com/militarymama.
Morning decisions. A creamy mocha frappuccino drink? A sweet vanilla? Maybe a smooth caramel? Or that white chocolate mocha? Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Start your day with bottled Starbucks Frappuccino drinks. Pick up a bottle near you wherever you buy your groceries.
James Douglas Pou grew up on a farm in Garrettsville, Ohio as the youngest of 4 children. He was a standout athlete in football, wrestling, and track. He was the homecoming king and served as a student body officer. He graduated from Garfield High School in 1978 and briefly attended Hiram College. College wasn't for him, though, so he worked different jobs looking for the right fit. By 1979, Doug had moved to Galveston, Texas, and was working as a diesel mechanic. His roommate at the time was talking to a recruiter about joining the Air Force, so Doug tagged along to the recruiter's office. While his roommate spoke to the recruiter, Doug picked up a pamphlet on pararescue and read it. The roommate decided that the Air Force wasn't for him, but Doug was intrigued and signed up on the spot. With no guarantee that he would even make it through PJ training, Doug was determined to make this his job. He passed a screening test and 8 weeks of grueling training that is designated to weed people out who can't handle the physical demands of special operations. Once Doug passed the initial test, he entered what's known as the PJ pipeline, where he received specialized training in emergency medicine, mountaineering, parachuting, navigation, survival, combat rescue, and air operations. Doug completed his training as an honor graduate and doubled down on his Air Force education with a paramedical degree from the University of Albuquerque. For his first assignment, Doug was assigned to Fairchild Air Force Base in Spokane, Washington. It was in Spokane where Doug would meet a former professional figure skater turned running shoe store manager named Susie. Doug was smitten at first sight, but it took Susie a little bit longer to reciprocate. He purchased a pair of running shoes and called back later to ask Susie out. She said no because her mother had warned her about Air Force men. But Doug was persistent and called her every week for 3 months to ask Susie out, even though during that whole time she turned him down over and over again. Finally, he entered the store again and asked her out in person. Susie finally said yes, acknowledging his strong faith in God and in people. After dating for the summer, they married on November 13th, 1982. In 1983, when his assignment was over at Fairchild, the Air Force moved them to Keflavik Air Base in Iceland. The Pous had 2 sons, Byron, who was born in 1983, and Timothy, who was born a year to the date later in 1984, which is kinda not so cool. I would not want to share a birthday with my sibling. Although it is cool for the mom and dad to be like, hey, we had 2 kids exactly 1 year apart. But as the kid, I would be like, no, thank you. Well, anyway, back to Doug. Doug had found his niche. He excelled at the dangerous, high-speed life of a PJ. Hanging from helicopters during a storm while at sea? For Doug, it was a hell yeah. He was credited with 12 saves in the first 5 years of his career, and the saves included plucking a sick Russian fisherman with appendicitis from a boat while at sea. He also rescued a hiker from Iceland who had fallen into a deep crevice in a glacier, and he saved 2 pilots from England whose plane went down during a blizzard. A PJ's training never ends. Sometimes it goes a little bit longer than planned, and during a survival training mission in the North Sea, Doug was set out in a raft 5 miles from shore. The officer in charge of this program, or this training program, forgot that Doug was out there until almost 2 hours had passed. They located the raft with a nearly hypothermic Doug still in it. He was so close to dying and was thankfully found in the nick of time. After 2 years in Iceland, the Pous moved to Kirtland Air Force Base, New Mexico, and that was in December of 1985, where Doug became part of the PJ pipeline teaching at the Air Force Pararescue School. In May of '86, Douglas' illustrious career was featured in Airman magazine in an article that highlighted his incredible saves, as well as how his wife Susie supported him in the unit in Iceland. After they PCS to Kirtland, Doug would disappear while riding his bike. While the Air Force declared Doug dead 10 days after he disappeared, it took civilian courts a year and a petition from Susie to have him legally declared dead. She needed the declaration so that she could collect on his civilian life insurance policy. The petition, filed in April of 1988, was affirmed by a judge a month later, and Susie was able to receive the funds. In an article from 1990, Susie spoke fondly about Doug's love for his sons. She told the Akron Beacon Journal that he would ride his bike early every morning so that he could have afternoons free at home to play with his boys. She said that Doug spent hours playing with them, getting right down on the floor with them, making it hard for her to figure out which one was the adult between them. In the article, which was written in August of 1990, more than 3 years after his disappearance, Bill Burton, Doug's friend, still voiced his doubts that Doug ever went into the river. But Keith Patterson, the PI hired by the Pous, said, quote, "If Doug didn't go into the river, then I would have expected to find some evidence that he was on the bridge after the accident. I mean, either something physical like blood, fiber, and tissue fragments, or at least eyewitnesses. No such evidence was ever uncovered," end quote. At the end of the article, Doug's widow Susie and his mother told the paper that they were coming to terms with the fact that Doug was dead. 5 years had gone by after Doug disappeared, and Susie and her sons were living life in Washington. Susie had met another man, fallen in love, and was planning a wedding when all of a sudden her world was turned upside down. It turned out that Doug Pou had been found alive. But there was so much more to the story. So we'll go back to a few months before Doug disappeared. In October 1986, Doug had traveled to San Diego to participate in some training with the Navy SEALs in Coronado. During the training, Doug met a woman named Monica Marie Joyce at a bar near the base. Monica was instantly attracted to Doug. He was handsome. a military hero who went on dangerous missions all over the world. But Doug fed her a line of BS, saying that he didn't really have a home because of his military duties. He told Monica that after his missions were over, he'd just take vacations, and that's why he, didn't have a home base to go to. He also told her that because of injuries he suffered in a mine blast in Vietnam, he could never have children. Monica might not have noticed at the time, but Doug wasn't old enough to have served in Vietnam. He was born in 1960, so he was only 13 when the last U.S. troops pulled out of Vietnam in 1973. But after their initial meeting, the two spent the following week together, seeing each other every night. Monica told Doug that if he ever quit his job, she would be all his. Doug went back to Kirtland and his family that he had lied about not having. After the training was over, he went back to San Diego 2 weeks later to spend a few days with Monica. After this, she didn't hear from him for a month when she received a letter from him on December 12, 1986. In the letter, Doug said that he was going to be on a mission for a year and that he wanted her to remember that he really loved her. Monica received a Christmas present in the mail from Doug, and then starting on New Year's Day, January 1st, 1987, Doug called her once a month. He would tell her how much he loved her, and on one call, he even told her he was looking at wedding rings. On May 12th, Doug took things to the next level. He made the decision to desert the military and leave his family behind by faking his own death. He intentionally crashed his bicycle into the bridge and then jumped off of it into the river. He was able to make his way downstream about 800 yards from the bridge, where he climbed out of the river and made his way to a bus station in Albuquerque. There, he used the last $50 he had on him to buy a bus ticket to San Diego. 3 days later, on May 15, 1987, he woke Monica up by tossing little pebbles at her window. Monica looked outside and saw a disheveled-looking yet smiling Doug standing there. He didn't have anything with him other than the clothes on his back and 87 cents in his pocket. He told Monica that he had finally gotten out of the military. 4 months later, they married, except Joyce didn't marry Doug Pou. By this time, he had assumed a new name, Christopher Keith Riggs, which Monica would go on to take as her married name. The real Christopher Keith Riggs was a 10-year-old boy who had been killed in a bicycle accident years earlier. Doug chose the name while scanning newspapers at a library. Choosing a name to use as an alias wasn't the only thing that Doug was searching for in the newspapers. He was also looking for anything in the Albuquerque papers that mentioned his name. Once he realized that the Air Force had declared him dead, he knew there was no going back. With the declaration, it wasn't in his best interest to ever go back. Despite telling Monica that he couldn't father children, he eventually confessed to her that he did have a family back in New Mexico, but he didn't make this confession to her until a year after they had been married. Doug told Monica that he hadn't been injured, but that he had gotten a vasectomy. Now, this is according to Doug, so take it for what it's worth. He said that since Monica knew all about his secret life, she used it as leverage to force him to have a vasectomy reversal. The couple went on to have 2 sons together and lived a relatively quiet life in San Diego. Doug, aka Christopher, wasn't done fathering children yet, except he didn't have a third baby with Monica. What he did was he had an affair and got a neighbor pregnant. According to him, it was an accident. The woman gave birth to a daughter, and eventually, Doug left Monica. 5 years after he disappeared from Albuquerque and 6 months after he left Monica, Monica decided that she had had enough, so she contacted the Air Force, informing them that Doug Pou was still alive. Seriously, William Congreve said it right when he wrote the tragedy The Mourning Bride, that included the phrase, quote, "Hell hath no worry like a woman scorned," end quote. Doug knew the gig was up when he noticed that he was being followed around town by unmarked surveillance cars. Then, in June of 1992, he heard helicopters over his house. They were taking surveillance pictures. Doug was still doing a daily workout, but now it was a morning swim. When he came back from his swim on June 10, 1992, he was met by a squad of law enforcement officers waiting for him at his house. When they asked for his name, he told them it was Christopher Keith Riggs. One last try at being deceptive, I guess. Upon learning that the man she thought died was still alive, Susie filed for divorce and dropped Doug like a hot potato. Can you imagine the level of hurt she felt learning that he ditched her and their sons to be with another woman to then start a whole new family? James Douglas Pou was brought to March Air Force Base in California, where he was held without bail while awaiting his court-martial. He was tried for desertion and bigamy, facing a 5-year sentence if convicted, along with a dishonorable discharge and forfeiture of all pay and allowances. When the trial began, tons of witnesses, including his second wife, Monica Joyce, testified against him about his web of lies and his infidelities. Bill Burton, who was now a master sergeant, testified about Doug's career in the Air Force before he deserted and his exploits as a pararescueman. As the story about Doug's deceit got out, Hollywood took an interest in his story. A big interest. 6 different production companies sent representatives to the court-martial trying to vie for rights to the story. A few days after their appearance at the court-martial, an announcement was made in a Hollywood paper that stated that Doug, his family, and some of his friends would receive $500,000 for the movie rights. In today's money, that would be about $1,120,000. However, Doug was only allegedly supposed to receive a penny, with the majority of the funds going to his family. As the trial went on, Doug's defense emerged. Through an expert witness psychotherapist, the expert told the court that Doug had been emotionally and sexually abused by his father when he was a child. Doug made the decision to desert and leave his family because he had yelled at his sons, the ones that he had with his first wife, Susie. So he had yelled at his sons one night when they were being rambunctious. Doug said he felt rage building up inside of him and was worried that he was going to become abusive with his sons. So that's why he left. He also claimed that that's why he left Monica as well, because he was scared he was going to beat his 2 sons with her. Doug's sister, Jamie Ann Sitko, lent some credence to his claims of abuse. 2 years before he was captured, Jamie had reported to police that when she was a child between 1963 and 1971, she had been sexually abused by their father, James West Pou. Not just that, but that their father had been a member of a cult and that she was subjected to ritualistic beatings, rapes, and mental abuse by her father and 10 other men. Jamie's memories had been repressed but had come out during therapy sessions with a mental health professional. Jamie filed a lawsuit against her father seeking $200,000, which is about $480,000 today, and she was seeking this in damages due to her inability to hold a job and for the out-of-pocket costs that she was incurring while she was going through treatment. In 1993, she was awarded $10 million, which is nearly $22 million today in damages. I doubt that she ever recovered probably any money at all, but it probably gave her some closure. So let's go back to 1992 and Doug's court-martial. Instead of going through a fully litigated trial, Doug entered a guilty plea and was sentenced to 3 years in prison and a bad conduct discharge. And that rank that he had worked so hard to obtain, all of it gone. As part of his sentence, he was reduced to the rank of Airman Basic, which is an E1. As part of the plea deal, Doug admitted to everything. In turn, the government dropped a larceny charge that was based on Susie receiving $500,000 in life insurance money. After Doug was sentenced and was serving his time at the military jail on March Air Force Base, a new accusation emerged. It's unclear how Doug was tied to his allegation. I think it might have been his second wife. But it turned out that while Doug was fake dead, there was a bank robbery in Corpus Christi in August of '89. The bank robber was wearing military camouflage and holding what looked like a grenade. The man made off with $40,000, which is roughly $90,000 today, in cash. Welp, Doug would add bank robbery to his rap sheet. While Doug waited for his second court-martial to begin, he was still being held at March Air Force Base, and that was where the second court-martial would be held. But being the cocky piece of work that he was, Doug, no kidding, told the guards that the cell that they held him in wasn't enough to hold him, stating, quote, "When I want to leave, I'll just walk out," end quote. And that's exactly what he did. Sometime between 11 p.m. on Monday, May 31st and 4:30 a.m. on Tuesday, June 1st, 1993, Airman Basic James Douglas Pou escaped. They couldn't find any evidence of a forceful escape. It seemed that Doug had just disappeared. Kind of like he just walked out. 2 weeks later, Doug surrendered to Navy officials at Miramar Naval Air Station. The Air Force determined that leaving him at the Navy brig was preferred because they felt that the Navy had better resources and staff to help Doug with his psychological issues. This is just me speculating here, but I bet they didn't want Doug walking off again. According to Doug, he spent the 2 weeks that he was on the lam hanging out in the mountains in Southern California, camping and fishing. He decided to turn himself in after talking to his psychologist, the same one that testified at his first court-martial that he was mentally unstable due to the abuse at his father's hands. At his second court-martial, Doug faced the following charges: bank robbery, fraudulently obtaining a passport, unauthorized wear of an Army scuba badge, and escape and desertion following his jailbreak. After 11 days of testimony, a jury of 8 officers listened to testimony from 35 different witnesses. Some were there in support of Doug's defense team, some were there for the prosecution. Doug's defense lawyer claimed that he was innocent because of his, quote, lack of mental responsibility due to a mental condition called dissociative disorder. The star witness for the prosecution in this court-martial was Monica Joyce. She was reportedly visibly angry during her testimony. She told the court that she knew nothing about his previous life until Doug made an emotional confession to her about his former life and the bank robbery. There it is. So probably Monica came forward with that. She said that Doug was gone most of the time from July until October of that year, when he confessed after returning home with a duffel bag filled with $40,000 in cash. Monica testified that Doug told her it was money the government owed him from previous intel work. Doug couldn't let Monica tell her own story, so he took the stand in his own defense and testified that Monica knew he was married and had deserted the Air Force from day one. He claimed that he planned on leaving Monica, but that she gave him 2 weeks to come up with $40,000 to pay her so she wouldn't turn him in. It was basically hush money, according to him. Doug said he left his and Monica's house and drove to Kirtland Air Force Base. When he got there, he secretly watched his buddies in his old unit training, then drove to Corpus Christi on a whim and robbed the bank. Doug also testified about how he escaped from the confinement facility at March Air Force Base. Somehow, he was able to get his hands on the real key. He made an impression of it in a bar of soap, then cut out the shape using a pair of toenail clippers. He filed it down by inserting the makeshift key into an air conditioner fan wheel. Then he used it to literally walk out the front door. The night he escaped, he stuffed sheets and pillowcases to make a human shape under his blanket, so when they did bed checks, it looked like he was in his bunk. He stole a field jacket from a fellow inmate and headed out the front door. From there, we know he eventually called his therapist, who talked him into turning himself in. After final arguments, it took the jury just 2.5 hours to find James Douglas Pou not guilty for the unauthorized wear of the Army scuba badge, which apparently he wore on his uniform in November of '92 at his first court-martial. The larceny charge for the theft of the field jacket was lowered to misappropriation, and the desertion charge was reduced to AWOL. He was found guilty of the remaining charges that included bank robbery and fraudulently obtaining a passport. Doug was facing a maximum sentence of 16 years and 9 months confinement. He was ultimately sentenced to 6 years, another bad conduct discharge for good measure, forfeiture of all pay and allowances, and another 2 years if he didn't pay a $42,000 fine. Airman Basic Pou was sent to Fort Leavenworth to serve out his sentence.
Good night, itchy eyes. Good night, sudden sneeze. Good night to your symptoms of allergies. Zysol is the allergy medicine you take before bed. It provides powerful relief while you rest your head. Not just all night, but all the next day. Zysol keeps working, keeping allergies at bay. And without those annoying symptoms disturbing your rest, you can wake up the next morning feeling your absolute best. Remember, be wise all. Take Zysol. At night.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistant's assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
In 1997, a movie titled Lies He Told, starring Gary Cole, was released that was based on Doug's break from reality. IMDb rated the movie with 6.1 stars. Myrtle suffered through watching the movie on Peacock and barely wants to give it a 4. When I asked her about the movie, Myrtle simply replied, "Why is it that the Navy gets Top Gun and the Air Force has to be represented by a cheesy movie like this?" And then she said, "Don't even get me started on Iron Eagle." In 2003, Doug published a book called Hence the Rivers Come. He wrote that book apparently with a co-writer. Neither Myrtle nor myself read the book, but have at it if you have the time. Other than that, I was unable to find anything else about what Doug has been up to for the last 20 plus years. But listen, I found this case about Doug Pou on a whim after hearing about 2 different military men who attempted to fake their own death. There wasn't a ton of information about these other cases, but I did want to briefly mention them because one involved a no-kidding attempted murder of a doppelganger. In October of 2002, a 20-year-old Army specialist from Fort Bragg named Jonathan Meadows scoured internet chat rooms for weeks in search of someone who was his lookalike. Meadows was a 5', 6" man who weighed 150 pounds with brown hair and blue eyes. Meadows had become frustrated with the Army and he was depressed. He wanted to fake his own death to escape the Army, but also to escape his wife. So, when thinking about faking his death, murder seemed like the only option. Meadows thought if he left a body behind that looked like him, he could just roll out and assume a new identity. Meadows and his wife had separated a month prior to the faked death incident, and she moved to Tennessee with their daughters, who were 3 and 7 months old at the time. Meadows searched online and he met a man, 26-year-old Stephen Jeremy Bowen, who met the physical requirements that Meadows was looking for. It's unclear from my research what were the pretenses for the meetup, but Meadows and Jeremy met at a bookstore for coffee before Meadows lured Jeremy to his home, tied him up, and stabbed an 8-inch knife into Jeremy's neck. Well, that escalated quickly. Jeremy managed to pull the knife out of his throat, cut the ropes from his hands and feet, and made his escape to a neighbor's house for help. Jeremy survived, but was hospitalized with severe cuts to his throat. Recognizing that his plan was foiled, Meadows turned himself into a deputy not long after the attack. He was charged with attempted first-degree murder and held on a $50,000 bail. Detective Barbara Davenport with the Cumberland County Sheriff's Department told the News and Record, quote, "This is the most bizarre case I've ever had," end quote. Jeremy Bowen recovered from his injuries, and since I couldn't find any trial or court-martial information, it's probably safe to assume that Meadows pled guilty. And if you thought faking your own death was only a thing of the past, well, you'd be wrong, because I found an even more recent case. On December 18th, 2019, Ryan Bell of Bonnie Lake, Washington, helped his cousin Private Devin Schmidt, a soldier assigned to Joint Base Lewis McChord, to fake his own suicide. The day prior, which was December 17th of 2019, Ryan and Devin went to their grandparents' home in Bonnie Lake, then headed to a friend's house in Puyallup. When they got to their buddy's house, Devin told Ryan his plan to fake his own death. Devin said that after he pulled off his disappearance, he was going to travel to Mexico so he didn't have to go back to the Army. Ryan agreed to help his cousin by reporting that Devin had killed himself. The next day, Devin failed to report for duty at Joint Base Lewis McChord. He was miles from the base at his cousin's house where Ryan lived with his mom, and remember, they lived in Bonnie Lake. Ryan made sure to keep his mom in the dark about Devin being at the house. Ryan and his mom left the house at different times, meaning that they didn't leave together. At 9:15 a.m., Devin called Ryan and asked him for $150. Once he got it, he requested an Uber to pick him up from Ryan's house in Bonnie Lake and take him to Fort Worden State Park. It's about 95 miles from Bonnie Lake, and it cost him $144.66 to Uber. When Devin arrived at Fort Worden, he filmed his suicide video and then texted it to his cousin Ryan at 1:15 p.m. After receiving the text message, Ryan called his ex-girlfriend Haley and told her about the video. He asked her to go with him to Fort Worden under the guise that Ryan wanted her to help him search for Devin. When they got to the park, Ryan found, air quote, Devin's dog tags, his unlocked phone, and a phone charger on the bluff above a cliff within the park. The cliff was between 100 and 150 feet high, and depending on the tide, there was a small area of land where it met Puget Sound, which is the body of water that surrounds that part of Washington. After he found Devin's things, Ryan called Devin's parents. He knew full well that they were going to contact law enforcement and that the Coast Guard would somehow be involved. After Ryan contacted Devin's parents, he then contacted his own mom, Bambi Bell, and Bambi called the police as well. Bambi sent Ryan down to the Port Townsend Police Department to file a missing persons report. Ryan told the police that Devin had texted him at 1:15 p.m. with the video attached. It appeared that Devin took the video in selfie mode, meaning that he was there and by himself. In the video, Devin said, quote, "I guess if you're watching this, I'm no longer alive. I haven't been living the life I wanted to live. I've been too depressed lately. I just felt lost. I just wanted you guys to know I love all of you. I know you guys won't forget about me. Don't tear your own lives apart for it. While I'm gone, I want somebody to watch over my brother. And Ryan, I want you to go to all the places I wanted to go and leave a memory for me there. Love you guys," end quote. Believing Devin had jumped off the cliff into Puget Sound, the Port Townsend Police, Jefferson County Sheriff's Office, Army personnel, and the U.S. Coast Guard began an extensive search for Devin. The Coast Guard used their own H-65 and Navy H-60 helicopters, 2 87-foot patrol boats, and a 45-foot response boat to look for any sign of the missing soldier. In total, the Coast Guard spent 10 hours searching for Devin in the Sound. So let's just give a shout out to the Coasties for what they do. During the search, the Coast Guard battled wind gusts that were between 20 and 40 miles per hour, heavy rain, and low visibility just to rescue Devin, who wasn't even ever in danger. They put their lives on the line because Devin Schmidt couldn't handle being in the Army anymore and tried to fake his own death. The entire time that law enforcement and the Coast Guard were searching for Devin, he was hiding in a porta-john at a park and ride. The following morning, he snuck into his mom's house and used her computer to create a fake Facebook account so that he could send his cousin Ryan a message about a meetup time and location. The meetup time and place was going to be 6 p.m. at McDonald's. With some help from Ryan's mom, Bambi, the police figured out that Ryan made false statements about where Devin was, what had happened, and they quickly realized that Devin was alive and well. Devin had tried to fake his own suicide because he was facing disciplinary charges from the Army. Go figure. The DOJ complaint did not say what those charges were, but anyway. The Port Townsend police set up surveillance at the restaurant, aka the McDonald's. Devin arrived 5 minutes early and was taken into custody. Ryan was also taken into custody when he arrived at McDonald's. It turns out that there was another Army soldier who had discussed faking his own death with Devin so that they could go to Mexico to, quote, fight cartels as, quote, freelance fighters. But it wasn't mentioned in the complaint whether this other soldier received charges or not. Both Ryan and Devin admitted that the entire thing was a hoax. Devin was charged with being AWOL under the UCMJ, but in a plea agreement, the Army agreed to administratively separate him with a general discharge at the rank of private. This basically diversion program allowed Devin to be separated from the Army without a criminal conviction. Devin and Ryan were charged in federal court for sending a false distress message and wasting, are you ready for this? They wasted $172,000 that the Coast Guard spent during those 10 hours that they had been searching for Devin. The two guys faced up to 6 years confinement and up to a $250,000 fine plus financial responsibility for all the costs incurred by the Coast Guard. As with the last story, I was unable to find any legal outcome for this case, leading me to believe that there was probably some sort of low-key plea deal. No news sources reported on the case after the federal charges were incurred. True Crime Army, I am so glad that I was able to bring you a few cases where everyone survived, albeit these were con men, but no one died, although there was that one guy who got stabbed, but he did survive. I know that these cases can weigh heavy on many of us, and so I wanted to bring you kind of a low-key case this week. Last week, I also released a low-key case in my bonus episode on Patreon and Apple Premium, where I talked about a case of a man who applied to be a hitman online. It's a crazy case. If you aren't already supporting the show through Patreon or Apple Premium, you might want to jump on and listen to that most bizarre case. And while you're at it, you will get access to 45 bonus episodes immediately. If you have a road trip coming up or a long flight coming up, bonus content is great for those of you who are all caught up. Also, shout out to everyone who logged into Apple and Spotify and even Facebook last week and left 5 stars for the show. Your 5-star rating goes a long way, and I appreciate it more than you'll ever know. Shout out to Myrtle for researching and writing this episode for me. She is the bomb diggity. My sources for this episode include articles found in the Akron Beacon Journal, the Los Angeles Times, the Albuquerque Journal, Airman Magazine, News and Record, Lexington Herald Leader, Justice Department press releases, and a criminal complaint. Also articles in the Army Times and the U.S. Air Force website. Military Murder is a Mama Margot production. This episode's executive producers are Falcon 13, Myrtle, and Jen. My newest assistant producers are Tito, Amanda, Jose, Nancy, and Celeste. Thank you for joining. The music was created by Tyops. Until next time, remember, you never really know what someone is capable of, so remain vigilant always. You have a fabulous week, and I'll keep digging to bring you another military murder story next week.
Mama's working on her podcast. I don't want to.